Welcome to Shh. Mom and Dad are talking, where we put the kids to bed, talk mad
shit. And today we're talking about a very interesting topic today, and we have a guest with us today as well. And what we're talking about was the announcement about Facebook and how they were censoring a couple of individuals. But I want to welcome to the podcast, to the show, Dr. Carter. Say what's up to the people, Dr. Carter.
Greetings, family. It's a pleasing pleasure to sit here on this podcast and with two highly intelligent individuals. I'm excited about the subject matter we're going to discuss today.
Dr. Carter is a scholar, has a lot of wealth of different experiences. And when I was thinking about this topic, I couldn't think of anybody else to have on a podcast. So basically what we're talking about today is if you've been paying attention, if you've been on social media, anywhere like that, you know that Facebook recently censored a couple of individuals. And who are those individuals that they censored? One of them was Farrakhan, Minister Farrakhan, right? What was the other individual?
Alex Jones from InfoWars and Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah, and a couple of other individuals. And what it's done is made people question, is what Facebook doing a violation of freedom of speech? So what are your thoughts just in general of just Facebook banning those individuals and somewhat kind of silencing them, Dr. Carter?
Well, I think it's a slippery slope for Facebook to become this thought police, this big brother, if you will, to determine who should be able to post comments on their social media site. I think it's dangerous because you don't know what the criteria really is. There's a lot of subjectivity involved in it, and they can ban you for saying something that they just don't feel comfortable with you saying. And so in a country like America that prides itself off of the freedom of speech, I think that Facebook is heading this country in the wrong direction when it comes to understanding our place in social media.
And I think that one of the things you said that was real fascinating was the subjectivity. And what it makes me constantly think about is who gets to decide? What is the criteria that these people use? And by what standard is speech, or what is considered acceptable? Because in all things, like when you think about, let's say on the job or employment, they may have a dress code or dictate what individuals can do and cannot do on the job, and it has a specific purpose. They kind of outline it to kind of remove the subjectivity from it, so that when they say, look, you're not in dress code, it's clear. But when you do something like this, like, who has the right and who has the ability to say this is what the criteria is, especially when it's something so subjective? It's real. It just seems like, how can you really police this thing and be objective? Doesn't seem like it's possible.
Well, see, that's the scary part. Who's making up the criteria? Are Facebook being influenced by special interest groups? And see, that's the concern of a lot of people, is that there are special interest groups who have targeted these specific people that Facebook have banned because these special interest groups don't like what they say about them. And so that's a dangerous space for Facebook to continue to allow themselves to be used by external forces. They allowed the Russians to influence the American elections, and now they're allowing themselves to be influenced by special interest groups who have a problem with certain Americans expressing themselves.
And social media seems to be the new frontier of, as far as where people get their information, and it seems to me that, I don't know, I think when people think of freedom of speech, they think that they have the right to say whatever they want to without consequences. And you do have the right to say what you want to say, be it inflammatory or not. But there are consequences to that. Now, is Facebook a private company or is it a public company?
They're a private company.
A private company, they can have their own standards, I guess, of what they think is appropriate and acceptable. But what I find interesting with Facebook is that they like to toe the line between being a private company and a public company. They get to decide who they're going to just completely ban from who can have space on the platform. And then also would quickly get into government affairs and say, hey, we're going to give you information on this person and where their whereabouts and track them. So it's a very, I feel like they need to choose. Either you're going to be a public company and you're going to, I guess, kind of continue to do what you're doing, or you're going to be a private company. Yes, you do have the ability to say, hey, our private company, we're choosing to do this. And I think people need to understand, as a private company, now I understand it's a private company, they can do
almost
what they want.
But we were talking about that kind of off script, and you brought up a good point, which was you were talking about how if a company is towing that line so much so to where what was the terminology you used, where they can sway public opinion so much?
They can sway public opinion. And you made a very good point about where people get their information. 70% of Americans, according to some research, get their news from Facebook and Google. Mm-hmm. Now, there have been court cases that have all reached the Supreme Court in regards to whether a private entity can be put under the auspices of the First Amendment Constitution's freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. One of the cases that was very interesting was a case called the Prune Yard Shopping Center and Robin Several. Mm-hmm. What happened was young people were going out there doing a protest and getting signatures in this shopping center. The shopping center said that they were trespassing. The Supreme Court said because a shopping center is a quasi-public place, those individuals had a right to their freedom of speech because the shopping center was under public. Another one I just want to say real quickly was another case in Alabama called Marsh versus Alabama in 1946, where the Jehovah's Witnesses were sharing their information, had their name on a building. The company had their names taken down. The Supreme Court said because that company had so much influence in that city, they fell under the auspices of a public domain, and they also had to adhere to the freedom of speech. So I think that when this is all said and done, Facebook is going to be deemed a public space where people have the right to express themselves under the freedom of speech.
Yeah. And the other thing I find pretty interesting about this is, for example, I've seen a lot of people on their timelines, especially for Minister Farrakhan, standing up for him. Yeah, so many celebrities, just to name a few. Snoop Dogg. There's been a number of different celebrities to step up and say, yo, what are we doing here? And they were saying, and a lot of people said, look, you can't silence us, we'll go to YouTube. And it's funny because I've seen people, for example, I know individuals who have YouTube channels where they're gun enthusiasts. And YouTube has now made it difficult where they've kind of created guidelines about the type of things that they can do with their firearms now. And even to the point where some individuals who have gun channels where they may be just educating you on guns or shooting or just, going over different types of guns, whether, hey, look, this is a gun that was made 60 years ago. Some just gun enthusiasts, they can no longer monetize their channels. And as a result, a lot of them have to go to things like Patreon and things like that to try to get people to support them that way. And it just kind of makes me think that kind of exactly what you were saying, like that whole Pandora's box thing. It's like once you open this up, where is it going to stop? Will it stop? And now will we see not only Facebook, because, Facebook, they own Instagram. I think they own Snapchat. They own probably the top companies that people are using, or the top platforms that people are using on a daily basis. If you talk to people, probably, I don't know the actual stats, but I'm willing to say that the vast majority of Americans either have a Facebook, an Instagram, or a Snapchat. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So what do you guys think about that whole Pandora's box thing? Because even what if YouTube wants to do it?
It sounds like they're already doing it.
Yeah.
I understand people can get very emotional when it comes to certain topics. You mentioned, the gun control. That came from what happened in Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
We would like to think that it's because of Philando Castile being shot in his car by a police officer and Trayvon Martin, but really it was about those 6-year-olds being shot in the school. And so then the other high school, I can't remember the high school in Florida.
Yeah.
But in those kids rallying about, gun
the high school
control.
students.
And so some things get lost in the fight to get gun control and what is considered reasonable.
Yeah. And that goes exactly
what
you're
saying.
saying.
It gets lost in the shuffle, and there's no nuance to, hey, I'm a gun enthusiast who's safely showing people how to use a firearm, and you're connecting me with somebody who is, a domestic terrorist who wants to shoot up schools and movie theaters. So it gets lost in the shuffle. But I think the thing with Facebook is it's happening. The box is open. It's going to become a domino effect.
And even go ahead. That's cool.
I think what we have to look here is that when there's an introduction of new technology, there's always a fear factor.
Yep.
When radio was made widespread and people were listening to radios for programming and commercials and other news, there were some people who were concerned about the negative influence that music was going to have coming into their homes via the radio. And then when we moved into television, people had these same concerns about whether people would be able to express themselves, and if they express themselves and offend other people, should they be censored? And there were laws put into place. But we later found out that with radio and television, those censorships were lessened because it came out to be revealed that freedom of speech were being stifled. The same thing is with Facebook and other social media platforms. It is a new technology that's bringing up old fears that people have had, and I think that it's going to pan itself out. I think another thing that's going to happen with the government going to get more involved is that Facebook is becoming too big, and so the antitrust laws of 1914 is going to kick in. When Bell South Mall Bell was this big old company, and they broke it down into AT&T and several other companies because they became too influential on how people communicated. Well, the same thing gonna happen to Facebook, and I think when Pandora's box was opened by Facebook, they actually began the demise of the breakup of their company.
Yeah,
I can see it because when I found out that they were buying Instagram and Snapchat, I was like, why is that even possible? Why are we even allowing them to do that? Because they're so powerful. Because I've even had individuals, they want to change their name on Facebook, or they want to upload something. Facebook like, nah, you can't put that up. Nah, you can't boost this post, or you can't change your name to that name. Is that a real name? And like you said, they just have so much control because a lot of us people are doing business on social. Because it's not even just a simple thing of, oh, I'm sharing images of my children. Most people, I know myself personally, I use those platforms probably 99% of the time for business related things. So being impacted on that type of level, I think is something that's interesting as well. I think that one of the things, a quick switch was, I heard other people saying as well, is like, do we need to go back to some other platform? And people laughed and said, do you still got your Black Planet login? And do you think we need to...
I never had one.
I know, right?
We came up when Facebook was...
Yeah. No, they had Black Planets when we was in high school.
Oh, you know what? Giles.
Let me mention his name. Look, a lot of people, but the funny thing was, everybody that I know, when they do talk about Black Planet, it was always talk about how they was hooking up. Like, they was like, it goes down on Black. It's never was like, yo, it's great for networking.
Yeah.
So...
It was a dating website, basically.
I mean, I don't know if it was a dating website, but I think that people just... Yeah. But I think we need to have other platforms that we can go to that allow us to have some of the same nuances that we like about Facebook or Instagram.
So what happens when that company gets big and popular, and then they get a $2 billion offer from Facebook?
I know, right?
And see, that's the danger when you have a culturally sensitive social media platform come up. Many times people sell out for a profit, and they're not sticking to the true sentiments of freedom of speech.
It will happen. Look at how everything most Black people do on social media kind of gets hijacked. I mean, Black Twitter is a thing. You know, like, that's one thing people say that I don't really on Twitter that much, but that's one thing people say about Twitter is that you don't want to. That's one group you don't want to mess with, is Black Twitter. That's a thing, you know. So, It will happen to where that site will get so popular, and then who's gonna turn down a $2 billion payout?
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
we're all about the dollar here in America, and you build something with the hopes that somebody will pay you hundreds of millions for it, and it's just real interesting. I think I want to kind of, it was making me think about just this conversation in general. I was talking with someone, and I said, will we ever go back to a time? I was reading an article, and they were talking about, and this is kind of, it's about social media, but it's kind of a little segue. But they were saying that most people nowadays don't have a person that they can talk to intimately about things that are going on in their life, because these platforms have allowed us to create so many superficial relationships where we don't have real friends anymore.
People are lonely.
Yeah, they're lonely.
Isolated.
Yeah, they have 5,000 friends, 30,000 followers, but they're still lonely because those are not real relationships. And just like how I was reading something else that said that, and you guys may have seen this, that they said kids actually learn better by reading books that are hard copy books. That they learn better more when they're using writing with their hands and things than using tablets. So I just wonder, do you think we will ever go back to a time where meaningful relationships mean more than these superficial relationships that we have on social media?
There's always been a cycle between high touch and high tech. It's always been that. And human beings are sensory beings. We have to touch and feel things. And you're right, the research is showing that social media is changing the behavior of individuals and how they interact and being able to pick up cues and all these other things. I think that there's going to be a reset button. And things like Facebook censoring people, freedom of speech, is going to only cause people to gather again in a high touch society. We're going to start meeting people again because people refuse to allow their voice to be silenced. So, what could actually seem like a devastating thing could actually be the genesis of hitting the reset button where people start gathering and meeting people again in parks and other places where they can talk to each other and not be censored.
And have meaningful experiences.
I think the economy plays a lot into that as well. I feel like once the economy changes, things aren't going well. I think people go back to those old things that they used to do, where I remember when I was a kid and, we didn't have a lot of money. We had people come over on the weekends. Every weekend we had a house at somebody's house or our house playing dominoes, and you with all your cousins and with friends from work and stuff like that. Or we'll have a cookout at the park, or even doing simple things where we would sit and watch a movie together or play a game like Monopoly.
Or go outside and play.
Or go outside and play. We would be gone for hours.
On them bikes.
Gone.
As long as you got back before the street lights came on. But
you didn't come home if you needed to use the bathroom. Go to so-and-so house and use the bathroom. Go to so-and-so house to get a sandwich. And then come home when the lights turn on. So I think that the economy, when you don't have the money to do, the online shopping, or you can, technology makes it very easy for you to stay in your house, you know? Your credit card is linked to everything. You can order a movie. You can order Uber Eats. You can order, everything can come to your house. I feel like once the economy changes, people are more apt to go out and go back, and the pendulum swings to the other way, where we're more active with each other and being around each other. Where I work, some of the things that I hear is very odd to me, because I guess the generational gap. But just the way that these people date now, what is considered dating, is very strange. Like, in the communication and how they communicate is very strange to me. So,
I think that our generation, we were probably the last generation that had it both.
I just got the internet.
Yeah, like I can remember when we had dial-up. I can remember when you wanted to call somebody on the cell phone, you have to press the same button 5 times to get the letter or the number you wanted. Yeah. Or when you send in a text now, with the technology, the way it's moved, or even if you wanted to, talk to somebody, you'd have to I got to call you at 8 o'clock, my minutes is free, and you actually talk to people. And it wasn't like, oh, let me just friend you and I might like something here and there. So I think it's going to be interesting to see when people say, you know what, I want to go back, because people laugh at me when I tell them this. I tell them all the time that if I didn't have a business where I needed to be on there, I don't want to be on there. Like, I wish, like, if I won a lottery tomorrow, $100 million, y'all gonna be like, where Phillips at? I'm gonna be in a cabin somewhere with no electricity, no internet. I'm gonna be unplugged.
But we have to begin the process very slowly. And even with our children, you know, I took my family out to eat. And while we were at the table, I said, no one can pull out their cell phone. We're going to have to communicate with one another. And I think we slowly going to have to start weaning people off of this social media addiction, because we're giving the thought police too much control over the narrative that we have. And so the only way we're going to be able to control this narrative is we're going to have to talk to people face to face about life in general. And so I do believe, as you all say, that there's going to be a twist back to people having a more high touch relationship opposed to a high tech. It's just not working for us. And so
I think that's why, you know, podcasts are so popular now, because people have been wanting that. We live.
I know,
You
right?
hear the dog. But I think people have been wanting to have these long form conversations, you know, having these conversations that last for hours about one subject. And you get a podcast and it's, for example, you know, Game of Thrones, or even just a movie or a book you read, and people have these whole shows dedicated to this one show or this one book, or just in what I think it taps into is people, well, not virtually getting together and listening to something where they're interested in, and they feel like they're having a conversation with another person about it, that they're not getting up close. And I think that I think that needs to kind of be replaced in a little bit, because it creates, I don't know the word for it, but it creates this form of isolation.
Yeah, and that's why they were talking about how this generation is the most depressed, the most this generation has the most anxiety as well. And I can't tell you how many college students I have who say they have depression or anxiety, or even older adults. And it's because we don't have those real relationships. And then part of it too is, I was reading an article, they were talking about how people are constantly comparing themselves to others. And you see in social media, you get a highlight reel. That's all social media is. Nobody posts, I look ugly this morning, or you get the highlight reel.
You booed up on Instagram, but you didn't post how you just had a big fight.
Yeah.
About how Baze just overdrew the checking account. Or, you know.
Yeah, you get the highlight reel.
Yeah.
So, you know, you see people, oh, look at my car, my new car I just bought. I just remodeled my whole kitchen. Or look at me, I'm on the beach. And you don't know how they got those things. You don't know if they took out a third mortgage. You don't know that they overwhelmed in debt. I even saw one thing where people were faking like they were on vacations.
Exactly. And here's the interesting thing about this whole social media and the control of Facebook. Back in 1999, there was a very popular movie called The Matrix, in which human beings were plugged into this construct, this computer program that controlled what they saw, what they heard, what they read, and the associations that they had. And the character, one of the main characters named Morpheus, his job was to pull people out of this matrix. And I think that it is healthy for us to unplug ourselves out of this matrix, because if the thought police, which is a reference from George Orwell's book 1984, if the thought police is allowed to control the narratives of the people, then we are all actually in a mental slave plantation. And so we're going to have to make sure that we find a very safe balance of not getting all of our information from social media and depending on social media platforms to inform us. I'm going to date myself a little bit. Prior to this internet, there was something called the party line. And the party line was on the telephone, where people would call into this one area, and you had a group of people verbally talking to each other. And then, but they would also set up events where they met each other in the real world. And so I think that's where we're going to have to start using Facebook as a medium to force people or encourage people to come out of the virtual world into the real reality world or the real world. And that way that we can make sure that information, freedom of expression does not die and be controlled by the thought police.
And I think we can close it out on that. And to back it up, if there's one thing that should show you exactly what Dr. Carr and what we're talking about here should be taken into consideration is, when I found this out, it blew my mind. What's the guy that started Apple? Steve Jobs. And then who's the guy with Microsoft? Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Do you know that when their kids were young, they were not allowed to have any access to technology? These are the guys that have really revolutionized technology the way that we do things, and they won't even let their own children be on it.
That tells you a lot.
That tells you a lot, that we probably need to really reconsider some things that we're doing. And I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Dr. Carter, how can the people get in touch with you if they want to chop it up with you some more, just to learn more about what it is that you do?
Well, they can meet me out there in social media. You can look Henry M. Carter on Facebook, but also you can go to www.henrymcarter.com and also just really connect to me through those mediums, and I can bring you into the real world where I do professional and personal development workshops to help people become a better them and to use high touch techniques to foster greater interpersonal communication skills.
Outstanding. And then of course, you know where to meet us. Mom and Dad are talking. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Podbeam. And then we're working on some additional platforms for you guys really soon. We're also on YouTube. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video.
Please subscribe to our iTunes. We're not just I don't want people to think that we're a Game of Thrones recap show because that was our first episode. We talk about various topics. And go ahead and subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. Give us 5 stars on iTunes.
Show us some love. That's what she said.
Yeah,
and then look, I'm gonna hook you up. The next 2 things that we're talking about, survivalists and firearms, and should children be trained how to use firearms. And we actually talk with a survivalist and a firearms specialist. So that's going to be the next one after this one.
It's so dope.
And then I'm telling y'all don't want to miss that one. And then the next one we're talking about gentrification, because I had something crazy happen to me. Carter,
several times.
Hit him with the, you know the saying that we hit him with, Carter, the saying we say, what we say?
I'll see everyone at the top because the bottom is way too crowded. Peace.
Hit him, Candace.
Yo, what happened to peace?
Peace.